Welcome in and welcome back to another episode of the Under the Dome podcast, our second since Notre Dame beat Florida State in a nice, interesting, barn-burning type of a game on Sunday night. Certainly, we're going to talk a little bit more about Florida State, but seeing as it is now Thursday night before Notre Dame's home opener against the Toledo Rockets on Saturday afternoon, we're going to kind of focus our shift to talk a little bit about Toledo, but mostly about Notre Dame and what we hope to see against Toledo. So real quickly, a couple quick particulars. I'm your host, Ben Belden. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see my Twitter handle right there on the screen at RealBBelden. Anywhere you want to find my podcast, the Under the Dome podcast, go to my Twitter, click the link in my bio, and it'll take you to the YouTube link. It'll take you to Facebook. It'll take you to everywhere you can find it, the audio versions and all of that type of stuff. I don't like to try to spend too long because, you guys are smart. You're Notre Dame fans. So make sure that you're going to those platforms, subscribing, leaving comments, all of that type of stuff. That helps us grow the show, which is obviously kind of our point here. We like to reach as big of an audience as possible. So do that for me. Tell a friend. And, even if you think I'm an idiot, I'd love to hear it. Because I like the interaction. So today I'm joined by a guest who will kind of plug his show as well. Mike, how are you this evening?
I am fantastic, Ben. Thank you for having me. And I guess I'll do what Ben just did, introduce myself. You guys probably know me as 5'0", 100 because I am 5'0", 100. That's my podcast. You can find me on Twitter at 5'0" pod, but my name is Mike Palkovics. So you may have seen me as MJ Palk 21. I know some of you out there have. This is my new thing. So come on over, catch me. Me and Ben are probably going to do this a few more times throughout the season. I'd like to, but catch me over at the 5'0" pod. I got some fun things to say. I rant a little bit, maybe more swearing than Ben does, but that's okay. I'll keep it clean for this show.
Well, I was just telling you, I'm a teacher. And so, we live in a different politically correct type of a world. So believe me, I can let it fly. I just don't do it where people can replay it a bunch of times. So, anyway, let's dive right into it then and talk. Let's start with, before we talk a little bit about Florida State, because like I said, off the top, we'll inevitably end up talking about Notre Dame, Florida State a little bit throughout this show. But before we do that, let's talk about the news of the week in the last day or two. And there's really two pieces, I guess, of information, but you can kind of, fall under the same umbrella. The first one, Lawrence Keys, to kind of just talk about him one at a time, I guess. It was announced that he is not going to be with the football team moving forward. He will stay at Notre Dame as a student through the winter, where he will graduate and then likely move on to another program where I believe, off the top of my head, I believe he has 2 years of eligibility left, if I'm not mistaken, when you factor that COVID year in there. But I don't know. I'll sort of give my take first, which is, I don't know if it's the most popular take. I try to not just go with the popular stuff. I tend to try to not to Skip Bayless myself or anything, but I tend to be a little bit of a different thinker. I try to be. I don't really care that Lawrence Keys is not going to be with this football team because, I don't know. I don't mean to diminish, what the kids put into the Notre Dame football program. But when I heard this news, I was just kind of like, well, he's doing it to preserve his year of eligibility this year. He doesn't want to play in 4 games, burn a year of eligibility and all of that stuff. And so he sees the writing on the wall. I can't remember. I saw how many snaps he played. I don't think he was targeted against Florida State, unless I'm mistaken. The moral of the story is that he wasn't being used. And I think what this says to a certain degree, and when we get to talking about our other piece of news here in a second, I think this we'll talk about kind of the same thing, is that Notre Dame's young receivers, Deion Colsey, Lorenzo Styles Jr., are pretty good. And those guys are the next bearers of I don't know, the Notre Dame receiving room. And so I don't mind that Lawrence Keys is gone. Certainly it hurts depth. Certainly there's, a lot of things that you can make of this. But at the end of the day, does it hurt the product on the football field? I don't think it does. In fact, maybe it helps in the long term by opening up some reps for those younger guys. What's your take on the situation?
I have to agree. Keys, I mean, he looked nice in the spring game, but that's a spring game. I mean, let's not make that out to be what's going to happen in the season. I'm totally with you. His production just wasn't there. I mean, last year I felt like he was on the field quite a bit, and still the numbers weren't there. Especially, he had to be on the field because, Austin and Lindsey were out. Yes, you had McKinley and Skronik, but he was on the field and the numbers just weren't there. So I'm kind of in line with you in the sense of, because my biggest fear was that, not that they will, but they can, Lindsey, Austin, Wilkins, Davis, and Keys, now that Keys out, but all those guys can leave this year after the season if they wanted to. Our depth at receiver after that is 3 freshmen and a sophomore, and then 2 incoming freshmen who are supposed to be really good in Merriweather and Williams. But to your point, this might be a blessing in disguise to allow these younger guys to get the experience that they're going to need next year when Buckner ideally takes over. And now he's got guys that have played the game and played meaningful minutes, because I do believe you're going to see Styles. And I don't know how quickly you'll see Colsey, but I do believe you're going to see Colsey on the field. And it's not as bad as we think it might be. Yes, it thins out the position. It brings young guys in. But from what I gather, these young guys are performing. So it's not a bad thing. It's really not a bad thing.
All right. And so, kind of, I don't know, in a similar vein, you mentioned some younger guys playing in the absence of Lawrence Keys. Well, now we've got the absence of not only Maris Leofau, who was lost before the season. We lost Shane Simon for the season with a torn labrum that was announced today. And I'm just talking about the linebackers at this point. Paul Moala was lost in the Florida State game, torn Achilles. And so now very, 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 very thin at the linebacker spot. What that probably means is Jack Kaiser's probably moving back inside, or at least will at times. We'll sort of see how the distribution of how his snaps come from. Is he playing the rover? Is he playing the will linebacker? Where is Jack Kaiser playing? I mean, I think that's always kind of a question, is what position is this kid?
Yeah.
And then in addition, maybe a little bit of Prince Kali in there. I think that would be fun. A lot of people talked about him being the most exciting linebacker that's committed to Notre Dame since, the one and only Jalen Smith. That's a lot of pressure to put on the kid. I'm not necessarily saying that, but if he gets a few reps, especially in a game against Toledo on Saturday, I wouldn't exactly be upset to see that. In fact, I'm kind of excited to see what that looks like. But then really the big news in all of this is something that, ties into the receiving situation. And that's that all of a sudden now Xavier Watts is now taking reps at the rover position, and who knows where he falls on the. I think the depth chart came out and he's listed at an or as like the second or third spot, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. I'll let you go first on this one. When you heard, because no, I didn't care about Lawrence Keys really, but I sort of care about this one. But I'll like I say, I'll let you go first. So tell me your initial thoughts on Xavier Watts as a rover.
So my initial thoughts were kind of in line with we don't have depth at receiver. Now one guy is costing us 2 guys. I was like, okay. But then you got to look at the fear I have about the wide receiver depth won't be realized until next year, where linebacker depth is an issue right now, today at 9:54 on a Thursday. like with a game Saturday. So I don't really, who cares about next year's wide receiver depth when you don't have linebackers? The other thought was, okay, why receiver or why linebacker? Like, isn't there's got to be something else, but the rover position is kind of this weird hybrid. Is it a safety? Is it a linebacker? The position does a lot for Notre Dame. And in reality, I think Kaiser fits more of a true linebacker like a Will than a rover, which is Isaiah Pryor came into Notre Dame as a safety and ultimately became a rover. Xavier Watts played safety in high school. Now they got him working at rover. The other part of that is your first thought is, okay, how is a wide receiver going to transition to linebacker? How in the world is that going to even work to be formidable and successful and get something done? Well, James Awanu, I always screw up his name. James Anawalu.
Yeah.
Anawalu. That was not that long ago. That was under the Brian Kelly regime. He was a receiver that moved to linebacker. And correct me if I'm wrong, did he or did he not get drafted? I know he made an NFL roster. I know he played in the NFL.
He was playing for the Chargers for a long time.
Exactly.
I'll look it up while you're talking.
That's my point. Is initially as you sit back, your initial snap reaction is, what are we doing? But if you want to think of Xavier Watts the player and what he can make of this, you end up at James Anawalu, or even way back in the day. I know Deke Cooper. He came into the program as a receiver, ended up being a very good safety. I know safety's not linebacker, but point being, a transition from offense to defense and actually improving your view as a player. But from an overall Notre Dame perspective, you got to look at hoping he turns into that, but realizing that right now the concern is linebacker depth, especially when all three dudes that went down play the same position. Like how is really? Like, it's got to be the same position.
Yeah.
So there's something had to give.
Yeah.
To answer what's your take?
To answer your question about James Onwualu, as he did go undrafted, signed with the Chargers, didn't really stick, bouncing around with. I didn't realize he played for all these teams, but seems like he retired this past summer officially.
But point being is the position change probably allowed him to end up in the NFL.
Oh, absolutely.
So
his senior year, 75 tackles, 3 sacks, 11.5 tackles per loss for loss from the linebacker position. So that's pretty good for a receiver. So my take on the situation, I don't know. I think you can sort of sum this up. This will probably end up being the theme of the podcast. I have no flipping idea what to think about this. And I mean that in the most frustrated way, because I don't know. Like, on one hand, it's like if the Notre Dame coaching staff was so concerned about the receivers, they wouldn't be making Xavier Watt a rover right now. So obviously they're pretty okay with, Deion Colzie, with Lorenzo Styles, and what they've got, healthy at receiver right now, that they're not worried about, okay, we can't take Xavier Watt over there because what if this or that happens? I don't think that's a thing. Honestly, I think, if push came to shove, we're looking at Kyron Williams or Chris Tyree lining up in the slot more if, some of those receivers started going down before Xavier Watt would. That said, I don't know. What does it say about Notre Dame in their safety play that they can't take a safety that's already on the roster and bump them down to rover? Like, what does that say about KJ Wallace? What does that say about who am I missing? Well, the two other safeties other than Kyle Hamilton that are
DJ Brown, Houston Griffith,
and Houston Griffith. What does it say about them that neither of them can play the rover?
Did you watch the Florida State game?
Well, I did. And I forgot to plug this. So shameless plug here. UTD Daily, Under the Dome Daily, that I've brought back as a website. I wrote about this, that I'm real concerned about the other safety because DJ Brown whiffed on a tackle. Florida State's first 89-yard touchdown. Houston Griffith, one of the first plays, the second half, burned for 60-some yards. So, I mean, that's what it says about them, is that they can't trust them to play the position that they've been training at, so that you can't move them down to another position the week of the game. I think it says a lot about Xavier Watts as a kid, as a football player, that, you know, and I know there are things going around on Twitter right now. This is a big debate among Notre Dame Twitter that I don't know if you saw this or not, but, you know, that he was lied to and misled that he was going to play more and this and that and all that stuff. I don't even want to acknowledge that, because I don't know. I shouldn't have even said it. But what I feel like probably happened was, you know, dude, like, you're not playing at receiver right now. We think you can get on the field. Do you want to give it a shot? And if I'm him, I'm like, yeah. I mean, what's to lose? What's there to, you know, I just want to play football. So I think that says a lot about him, what he'll do for the team. And so maybe we have another Avery Davis type of a story here where, you know, didn't exactly work out as planned, but now you're going to find a guy that's going to have an impact on a football team. So I go both ways on it. But at the same time, it's just man alive. Like, what is going on with the receivers, that they're all either transferring, leaving, whatever, switching positions, and what's going on with our defensive secondary, that we can't get somebody to play this flipping rover position when it's not like this rover position was invented 2 days ago. Like, they've been playing the rover since Mike Elko was there. Mm-hmm. So it recruited this position, allegedly. But now you're taking a receiver to play the position. I don't know. It's frustrating to me, truly. It's probably more frustrating because of what I saw on Sunday night, in terms of, you know, I expected this team to be better than how it looked, even in week one, all things put aside. So, you know, maybe I don't get fired up this much real often. And here I am I'm talking a little louder than I normally do. I'm using my teacher voice a little bit. But, my God, like, why can't things be easy? Like, why, what is it with Notre Dame that, like, nothing's easy?
I know. And the most frustrating part, when I, like, kind of previewed the season, I had said definitively our front four, you know, MTA, I forget, Justin is the end and Jason's inside, but whatever. I mean, Heinisch, the Amendola brothers, and MTA. I was like, those four guys are going to be better than any offensive line we face. Then you add in our linebackers, and you could argue our front seven is, without question, our strength and probably better than a lot. Now that it's back to just the front four. The three behind them aren't what they were to start the season. The silver lining of all of this is the fact that all of this is happening leading up to Toledo and Purdue. And you could argue those are our two easiest games. Purdue's not great. And Toledo's just a MAC school. I know, just a MAC school, they're going to be feisty and all that kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is, the way this game should go, we should get Prince Colley on the field. We should get Watts on the field. We should get, on the other side, Styles and Colsey. All of these guys should get important playing time, and not just the last 5 minutes to watch Buckner or Pine or whoever hand off the ball to Estime or Diggs or whoever's back there. I don't want to see that. I want to see them mid-third quarter where they still have to play football. Yeah. I don't want to see them last 5 minutes like we saw Jurkovic until he transferred. I'm just using that as the example, but you've seen all the time. The guys that you're like, let me see what they've got, and all you do is effectively running practice drills for the last 5 minutes of a football game and not actually doing anything of consequence. And I want to see them in roles and in moments where they actually have to play their position. And Brian Kelly needs to see this too, and I'm sure he does. He knows more than me and you combined, but he's got to know how valuable it is to get them out there, given what's transpired over the last week. And then when you look at the linebackers the last month, he's got to know that those kids need to be on the field where it means something, where they can learn something, and I heard something about Collie, but now it applies to Watts more than it does Collie, I think. They need to get film on themselves playing that position to be able to be coached looking at their own decision-making and reactions and so on and so forth. That's going to help them as we progress through the season, because I do believe Collie and Watts are going to ultimately be a part of this rotation. I don't think there's any way around it given what's our depth is. So getting them on the field in a game that we should win quite handily is going to be better by far long-term than getting them in for the last 5 minutes to just stand there and, look nice in a golden helmet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you referenced a couple things that were good there, and one of them being that probably Brian Kelly and his staff have forgotten more football than you and I have ever known. So we've got that going for them. So at the very least, we have competent coaches that know what they're doing. I mean, to a certain degree, we love to sit here as Notre Dame fans and overreact to every decision that gets made, but at the end of the day, they know best. And so with that said, we've got a treat going for us. I've seen, I'm going to wait till he gives me maybe like the thumbs up that he's ready, that we're going to be joined here by Nick Shepkowski, the one and only and esteemed Nick Shepkowski. Nick, I don't know how much of that you caught, but I went on a pretty interesting rant about Xavier Watts moving to Rover just a second ago. And how frustrating that is to, it doesn't say much about Notre Dame's safeties and the guys that you would traditionally move down to a Rover in this type of a situation. And maybe says something about the athleticism of Xavier Watts, but just interested to sort of get, like I say, I know you don't have all the context here, but to just get your thoughts on that situation.
Well, I think there's that way to talk about it. I think the first thing you have to realize is, 12th of the way into the season, and this is where you're at linebacker wise. You couldn't script a worse story than this so far of how things just health wise have gone. So that's first and foremost. That's the first kind of takeaway there of Simon going down, of the other injuries that have gone down so far so quickly on. That's the first takeaway, is that it's nobody's fault. Like, freakish things happen, and that part stinks, but that's kind of where you're at. And the other takeaways I have from it right now are, it does. I think that's a great point that you make. It tells you a lot about your secondary, or how you kind of see your secondary right now. Isaiah Pryor listed in that position. That's a guy that's a former safety when he was at Ohio State. Came here as a safety, didn't last there very long, got moved down in the lower level, or in the next level at the linebacker spot. One thing, though, I think it does say that is a positive is the thing under Brian Kelly that's always been the case is, and I know, Ben, you and I talked about this a week or two ago, is the freshman receivers that do nothing. No one's trusted. They're not trusted to get on the field. They're not trusted to play game reps. I know you guys were just talking about game reps in the last 5 minutes versus actual kind of meaningful game reps, where you're not just running out of clock, you're not just taking knees, you're not just running dives up the middle. I think that says something about what Kelly, what Tommy Reese, what Del Alexander, what the entire staff kind of sees in their freshman receivers. Because if they didn't think decently enough of Lorenzo Styles, if they didn't think decently enough of Deion Colsey right now, you think that Xavier Watts would be making the move to the other side of the ball? I think that it speaks to that part, as well as, I know that I went out on a limb and said that they're going to combine to have at least 6-7 touchdown receptions last week. Maybe I'm a little bit out over my skis, but I do think that they're kind of that class of receiver that's going to take Notre Dame's receivers to a different level and a different scheme than what we've seen here in the first 12 years of Brian Kelly.
Well, let me ask you guys this: when was the last time you saw true freshman receivers on any depth chart for Notre Dame football?
It's next to never. Yeah, it's few and far between. If it has happened in recent years, it's the only reason is because of injuries, and it's not any intent of actually wanting to be out there playing much.
Styles was on there week one. I mean, Colsey obviously with the Keys and Watts situation, but Styles was on there week one, which said a lot to me about Styles. And then, like you just alluded to, the fact that Watts had, I guess, no issue moving over himself along with the coaching staff. And just that tells you how they feel, and then boom, Colsey's on the depth chart just like that. So it does say a lot. And before you came on, I was telling Ben, we need these young guys to step up. They need to be hits because the reality of it is every receiver we have above them is a senior and could leave after this year. I'm not saying they will. Not all of them are likely to, but they could. And if these young guys don't hit, I don't know what we're going to do.
Well, yeah, especially because now you look at it, the sophomore class, there's not anybody left playing receiver. I mean, it's just a gap that's there. And Johnson's gone to South Florida or Central Florida, rather. Was it Brunell he transferred to Yale, if I remember correctly. I think he transferred to the Northeast. And now you've got Watts playing the other side of the ball. I am curious of how, I mean, you talk about trial by fire. Just, all right, well, this is what we have planned. And good luck out there, kid, like Brian Kelly's speaking today. Good luck out there, kid. We're going to get you in some game reps. Sure, it won't be the first down of the first series, but see what you can do because we don't have a whole heck of a lot of other options right now.
Yeah. So I don't know. Going back to when was the last time a freshman got on the depth chart? Will Fuller, maybe? I mean, in like a specialty type of a role? I don't know. That might even be stretching. I mean, maybe that was his sophomore year. I don't know. But there aren't a lot of names that jump off there. That was a good point that you made, Mike. So I don't know. So as I kind of referenced earlier, I kind of want to talk about a couple things that I was tweeting about a little bit the other night and had a good conversation with a couple of people. And I was just saying this a little bit of tongue in cheek when I said it. And I don't even remember my own tweet word for word, but it was along the lines of, here are the things that I feel really great about in regard to Notre Dame football. And it was 1, Kyle Hamilton being an absolute monster in the back end of the defense. And 2 was, I don't really know that I feel really great about anything else. There's certainly honorable mentions, and it's a vague definition of great. I mean, I think I feel pretty good about the defensive line, and I think they'll finish more plays, as the season goes on. I think if we get a little bit better linebacker play, because the defensive line's not supposed to finish every play. I mean, you got to rely on your linebackers to come up and finish things off. But these are not things that I feel great about just yet. And I expected to come out of Florida State feeling great about a lot more stuff. Let's just put it that way so that I don't ramble too long. Mike, let's start with you. What things do you feel pretty good, pretty confident about? And how do you expect Notre Dame to either build off of that or improve? What do you want to see Saturday, I guess?
Yeah, so I don't want to just I kind of want to debate you, but I'm kind of in your vein. Is the closest next thing is going to be Jack Cohn. Just his ability to push the ball down the field. I mean, I'm sure you guys saw some of the stats being thrown around on Twitter. When was Ian Book just didn't do those things. Ian Book was nice. No problem with Ian Book, but that one thing lacking is what Cohn brings to the table, and you saw it on Sunday. You saw those chances being taken. Ian Book is not throwing that ball that Joe Wilkins caught. Ian Book, maybe he throws the ball to Austin. I don't think he puts it there. And the ones he did underthrow, that's just week 1 stuff. He's got the arm to do it. I don't think he realized how fast Lindsey is or otherwise. That's going to take time. The other thing that people are harping on, and I put this on my show, what was the bigger storyline, Cohn or the defense? My feeling was, in the season outlook, it's Cohn because we need him to do that. And I think he can. I do believe that. Now, the defense, real quick, I'm not as concerned as some people want to be about it because, as I told you, Ben, I do believe Marcus Freeman thought he had guys that can do certain things, and they turned out they couldn't. He's not going to let that happen again. Secondarily, tackling's got to get better, right? I mean, the guys were in the right spots. Yeah, the guys were in the right spots. We were putting pressure constantly. We just weren't tackling. And it's just got to get better. So I'm not too upset because I felt like the guys were in the right spot. Freeman's defense was putting them in position to make the plays. They just weren't. And at some point, is it Freeman or is it the guys on the field?
So, yeah, Nick, what say you?
Yeah, to answer your question originally, what do I feel great about? And Kyle Hamilton's a pretty good place to start with that. One of the most ridiculous interceptions. Kind of went the Harrison Smith route against Miami, and the Sun Bowl was at the end of 2010 season. That's the only play that I could think of for a Notre Dame player making that was anything similar to what Hamilton pulled off. It's absurd to go from an opposite hash and do that, and you see why if I'm him, I go to the pros at the end of this year, and I'm probably a top 5 pick, and you'll get all the columns and all the newspaper articles about how you can't draft the safety that high, and then Kyle Hamilton will go on to have a 13 or 14-year NFL career and be 6'4" at the position and make hundreds of millions of dollars doing so because he's a freak. Like it's rare that you have a talent like that you just know that not just is he a college star, he's going to go to the next level, he's going to be a star. That's a can't miss prospect of can't miss prospects in regards to that. But beyond that, great. I don't know if I feel great about anything else. If it's feel pretty good about or really good about, I think Isaiah Foskey's turning into a possible first round pick too. I know he's had flashes since he's gotten on campus, but he dominated large parts of that game the other night. And just like you're talking about, you have to finish at some point. Like, how many times did you have somebody either at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage in the freaking grasp and just not finish a play? Like that, I don't know if it comes down to conditioning. I don't know if the Florida heat and humidity was more than they wanted to lead on, not to make excuses or something. But at some point, you have to step up and just kind of finish a play. And that's what I don't know if we took it for granted under Clark Lee and just assumed the transition's normal. I don't know if it's just a blip on the radar of a bad night, and you're allowed that once in a while. It just stinks when you have really 8 or 9 guys that choose the same night to go and do it. But it's for no reason other than it can't possibly be that bad again. Like, that should be a natural improvement that you see this week, and not just this week, but in going forward. And the other thing I feel really good about, again, great might be strong, but I feel really good about. Cone, I feel good about. The receivers, though, the targets he has to throw to. Kevin Austin, it's like, I don't know, he's the greatest rumor you've ever heard of in Notre Dame history, because it's when Kevin Austin gets on the field, it's going to be lights out. You're going to have a dynamic playmaker. Comes, plays a couple games his freshman year, gets suspended his sophomore year, deals with the foot injury that pops back up as soon as he gets back on the field last year, it seemed like. And it's like, man, that'd be cool if you could ever play. It sounds like you can do some nice things, but don't really have to get to see anything ourselves. And what he did, that drive where he had the on the near side of the screen watching on TV, had the corner route that they were able to connect on, and that pass from Cone to him that resulted in the touchdown. I know that the video that went around that was viral of Aaron Rodgers this training camp with the Packers, that he throws the ball in the net from like 45 or 50 yards out. Everyone's like, ooh, that's so cool. Jack Cone just did that. He dropped the ball 45 yards downfield, exactly where he wants to go in the middle of an actual play. Like, that was a real stinking throw. And I know both of you were talking about it earlier and I'm a huge Ian Book supporter. Ian Book's never making that throw in his life. Like, let's be honest. Like, that's something that just he was not capable of doing. Jack Cone's not going to go and run and dive for as many first downs and God knows what that Book did and knock off number 1 Clemson. But Ian Book is never making that throw in his life in a game situation.
Yeah, I was incredulous Sunday night that there were people on social media somehow criticizing Jack Cone. I mean, did he miss? He missed 1 or 2 throws.
The Lindsey one was a
pretty
fair miss, but
and then he had the one batted down on like the second drive that looked kind of just sloppy. And I know there was a couple of. Anytime the offense looks bad, the quarterback bears the brunt of that. But I mean, how many times was Jared Patterson gonna miss snap? I mean, he snapped it. We thought Jack Cone was under center. He was in the shotgun. Like, I mean, there were other things that went on that I think kind of took away Jack Cone's momentum a little bit. But yeah, to you guys' point, like, goodness, like I think I saw a stat today that Ian Book had 5 touchdown passes last year where the ball traveled 20 or more yards in the air. And all 5 passes all last season, and Cone had 2 in the first game. So, I mean, that tells you all you need to know.
Here's my thing about Cone. All 3 of us, if we give us 2 minutes, we can tell you all 9 of his incompletions because there were only 9 of them on 35 attempts.
And with that, like one of them's on a Hail Mary that, I mean, he let's not forget, Michael Mayer doesn't drop that ball. Jack Cohn leads the drive to get the game-winning field goal off in regulation potentially.
Right.
And that's a freak. It happens. I'm Michael Mayer. Okay, you're looking for something else that's great. He's a great tight end. Like if you had any question before, you saw that last week. Like that's what a great college tight end looks like. And that's another guy that in a year from now, he's going to be a first-round draft pick as well if he wants to go to the NFL, and no fault of his if he wants to. Like that's a freakish athlete. That's another thing I feel great about. But Cohn leads that drive. He did everything he needed to do to get Notre Dame in field goal territory when he had 40 seconds on the clock to work with, and it just didn't happen that his best target had a bad drop at a real inopportune time.
And he had another bad drop, on the second drive where it's like, all right, well, now we're going to go and put him away. Maybe not away. Obviously, we can't say away. They blew an 18-point lead, but you go up 14-0. That feels a whole lot different than what happens. And then Florida State goes up 14-7, and we get the point. We know how that works. But
the hard part of both of those was that the reason he dropped those balls is because he was doing what Michael Mayer does. If he just caught the ball and just accepted, I'm already at the first down, it's third down, like situational football. Mm-hmm. But what makes him what he is doing the next thing. Yeah. And he was trying to do the next thing before he caught the ball.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, you could even go back to the second to last drive that Notre Dame had of the second down play call where they throw a Mayer in the flat. It's a little bit rushed by Cohn. Not a perfect ball, but all things considered, probably should have been caught. You catch that, you get upfield, you're first down, and very possibly that game never goes to overtime.
Yeah.
And so here we are. I don't know that we got all 9 incompletions, but we got about 7 of them. So
well, there were two in the first quarter as well with the second drive of the game that offensive line didn't. I mean, he wasn't able to step up, short arm things a little bit.
He short arm 2, Mayer dropped 2, the interception, short arm shorted Lindsey, 1 batted down, like.
I think it's 7 of the 9 right there.
No, he did not have a bad game.
No, not whatsoever.
2 quick questions, and then we'll kind of wrap up. I want to start with this one. Does the offensive line take a step forward this Saturday against Toledo? I mean, they have to. I mean, if you look at Toledo's depth chart, I mean, one of their starting defensive tackles weighs about 20 more pounds than I do, and I'm not the biggest dude in the world, not the smallest either, but you get the point. So it's like, does the offensive line and the running game take a step forward? And if it does that mean anything? I mean, are we still worried about this offensive line, moving forward? Maybe not Purdue, but Wisconsin. I think that's kind of the next buildup. And I think, Mike, you kind of referenced this a little bit ago. At least right now, while we're still figuring things out, we get Toledo, we get Purdue, both of them at home before we have to, before the Shamrock Series game against Wisconsin. So what are we looking for from the offensive line? And, at the end of the day, if we rush for 200 yards against Toledo, doesn't mean anything. Nick, let's start with you on this one.
Well, I think a couple things to take from that. I know that it's easy to look at last year's game against Florida State and just be, okay, well, Tyree went for 120 or whatever it was, and Williams went for 120, and both had a couple of huge plays in that, and you're able to think, well, it's going to be the same thing. Florida State, that's a hell of a job by Mike Norvell to rebuild on the fly of absolutely taking advantage of the transfer portal. It was 13 bodies he brought in, and you saw the difference it made on his defensive line. Not to say it's a great defensive line. I don't think you're going to look at that and say it's a bad defensive line at the end of the year. I think it's probably, sadly, one of the better ones Notre Dame's going to face this year, all things considered. I mean, when you've kind of seen things the way the schedule breaks down for them, at least things early on. But I think that also the game plan for Florida State was, all right, we know how dynamic this Notre Dame run game is, and they're losing offensive linemen to the pros from last year, but you still know that they're probably going to come out and do that. It's what I'm thinking Florida State probably thought, at least anyway. And they did everything they could to slow down or take away the run game. And Jack Cohn made them pay. They said, we're going to make this transfer quarterback that has never played an actual down of football with this team, with this set of receivers, with this grouping around him, make him beat us. And luckily for us, he did. And I think you're going to see different game plans against Notre Dame's offense this week and in weeks to come. But I think you're right. I think you raise a good point. Both of you do, in that really you have 2 weeks to get this thing right. Because I know that Wisconsin was run a lot of jokes. Is that showing on Saturday morning where you go to halftime, it's tied at nothing with Penn State. But the front seven, Wisconsin's pretty real. Now they're going to allow some big plays in the secondary if they can't get home. But you saw Penn State exploit that a little bit. But that front seven is pretty strong for what Wisconsin's going to offer there. So you've got 2 weeks to kind of figure this thing out. And I'm not saying that like hell's coming to breakfast, but it's a pretty good defensive front that you're going to see in Wisconsin here in a couple of weeks, regardless of what their offense did against Penn State 2 weeks ago. So I think that, yeah, Notre Dame does do better with Toledo and does do better against Purdue in the run game. And does it matter? We'll see how they perform as a result in 2 weeks from now when they end up taking down Wisconsin. I'll let you know if it mattered or not what they did against Toledo.
Yeah, exactly. Because how many times have we seen it? Notre Dame's running for who cares how many hundreds of yards. In the games that matter, we average 2 yards a carry.
Yeah.
So that needs to change. But to answer your question, if we don't run for more than 3.5 yards like Norfolk State did, we got problems. Yeah. Norfolk State averaged 3.5 yards a carry against Toledo. Not that 3.5 yards is great, but it's better than 1.9. But I do think Florida State planned for that. Florida State, the thing about defense is interesting. Just in general, if you have athletes, defense is more instinct, especially on the D line. It's more instincts than assignments. So when you get Jermaine Johnson and Keir Thomas, who are just straight talented, and they just get to improv and get to where they want to get to, it's hard to stop. So in Wisconsin, I think brings some of that. I don't know that Wisconsin have the same speed, but strength will be there. Absolutely, strength will be there. So Notre Dame does have the opportunity in the next 2 weeks to improve, and it better look. Let's put it this way: it better look good for us to have any confidence going into Wisconsin. But like you said, Nick, I'll let you know if it was worth anything, because
it's hard to tell.
it really is. And as good as Notre Dame's offensive line has been, all the awards and accolades and this and that, facts are facts. When we played Georgia and Clemson and Michigan and all the games of Alabama, all the games of significance that we want Notre Dame to be, they've, call it what it is, they failed. They failed in those moments. So beating up on Toledo and Purdue and running for 6-7 yards a carry is all good and well. But if you run for 1.9 against Wisconsin, okay, we're just better than Toledo and Purdue, obviously.
Yeah, I don't think I really have anything to add. I will say that the good news in some of this is that, going back to my discussion of, what do I feel really good about? I feel really good about Kyron Williams as a player. I don't feel really great that he's going to get the space he needs, but then again, he took a screen pass, I don't know, 60 some yards, whatever it was, scored in the passing game because he got a one-on-one situation. I mean, those 42 yards that he grinded out, I feel like 35 of them were after first contact. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, that's not an actual stat. That's just me saying that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like all 42 yards were Kyron Williams yards with very little help from the offensive line.
Right. So, even if the offensive line gets a little better, you still got a really good running back, I guess, behind it that's going to, hopefully take advantage of the steps that they do make, even if they're not real lengthy steps to continue with that metaphor, if that kind of makes sense. Okay.
I just don't want to eat my words, because I said on my show that, all the talk about the offensive line, I said how many years has it been where Notre Dame's offensive line, outside of a few select games, but in totality, has been a disappointment? It hasn't. And until they disappoint me, I'm not going to believe otherwise. So please don't make me eat my own words and be like, oh, crap, this was the year they disappointed.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Right. All right. Last little talking point question here. Are we at all, and I'm not going to pretend to be the Toledo football expert. Mike and I were talking before we started recording that, I live in Ohio. I know a little bit about Toledo football. I mean, they've probably played on a Tuesday or Wednesday at some point where I've caught them. They've done all that type of stuff. And, they're always in contention for the MAC. I mean, say what you want about the MAC, but I mean, I don't know. They're a respectable football school, I guess.
That's
Is
a
what
nice backhanded compliment if I've ever heard one.
I don't know.
They are a nice little football school.
I don't know what to say. I don't know how to recover.
Well, they had that one guy. How many years ago? Little number
Bruce
one.
Shepkowski, was he a Toledo guy, if I remember right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember different.
Then they had a little shifty, like 5'7", fast as lightning. He was made it to the NFL. I forget.
Yeah.
Where did Josh Cribbs go? Was that Akron? I'm getting my Ohio cities mixed up.
Kent State.
Oh,
Kent State. Yeah,
That's
Cribbs
the
was
other
Kent
one.
State.
Yeah, the other
American
Ohio schools.
Well, and it doesn't help that they're all blue, yellow, or gold and blue.
Right.
They're all the same colors.
Yeah, except Bowling Green. Bowling Green's deal. Your name's Bowling Green. Why are you orange and white?
Regardless, although that is a good point. Are we at all worried about Toledo on Saturday? I mean, does the effort from Sunday night give you any pause about, because at the beginning of the season, obviously we're Florida State win, Toledo another big win. I mean, how do we feel about Toledo? And are we at all worried about, because I just think I sat through 2 years ago, I guess it would have been. I was an attendee at the Notre Dame game against. No, I wasn't at that one, but I was against Vandy. And I know Vandy's an SEC school, but it still felt like that was supposed to be a blow. And I'm like, oh my, you know what I mean? And so I'm going on Saturday. I will be in South Bend, and it feels like I've been at a lot of these games in person. And so really what I'm asking is, am I cursed? And because I'm going, are we worried? No, in all seriousness. Are we going to be sweating out a game against Toledo? Mike, let's start with you on this last one.
I'm going to say no. But the reason I'm saying no is I actually looked up Toledo, see what they did. They were balanced, whether that was because they won big or they are an actually balanced offense. They ran for like 200 something and threw for like 220. If running is their thing, they're expecting to run for 200 yards. And from what I gather, they have a quarterback that's more mobile than a passer. That bodes very well for Notre Dame, especially with the mishmash we got going at linebacker, because I don't think they're prepared. Again, defense being instinctual. Running, go get the guy with the ball. When you throw passing mixes in, that's when your linebackers, you find out who understands how to play the position, who doesn't. But it's Toledo. If I had to put a number on it, which I will eventually probably on Twitter, but I think we're going to win something like 41-10.
Okay. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I'm plenty confident Notre Dame wins this game. Like, am I on upset alert? No. What I am on alert for is just kind of the weirdness of coming off of a Sunday night road game.
Yeah.
And the fact that you get back from Tallahassee at probably 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. You don't get the Sunday off of recovery. Instead, you're right into Monday. And it's just the short week and the weirdness that kind of comes with that. The one comparison I think I would probably make of it would be when Notre Dame started the 2012 season and came back from Dublin, and the extra time that it took. That was before the international games were in the week 0. So the extra time that it took, and then they come out and against a bad Purdue team, and it takes until Tommy Rees leads the game-winning drive that they kick the field goal with a couple seconds remaining. I'd be on alert for something like that, of kind of sleepwalking through the first half type of deal. But I mean, even in the event of that team went 12-0 and played the national championship, and we all know what happened with that year. This team's a heck of a lot more talented all around than that team was. That team had a great defensive line. It got by with some smoke and mirrors at times. This team's got a ton more talent than that, top to bottom. I mean, if you're looking 1 through 40 on this roster versus that one, it's not even comparable. And I think that's in terms of like upset alert. No, I'm not whatsoever worried about it. I'm more worried about just kind of almost like the Syracuse game last year, where you come out for the first 25 minutes and you're like, what the hell are we watching? This is awful. This team, why can't you move the ball? Why can't you do anything? And then it's like you blink, and in that final 5 minutes before halftime, it's 28-10 or whatever the heck it ended up being. They scored 3 or 4 touchdowns in about 4 minutes span. And I could very much see something like that happening, of like, good God, what are we sitting through this half? and you look up at halftime, you're like, oh, well, it's 28-10. Things are going to be okay. Like this is one of those games that, not to be like all coach speak and whatnot of not taking your opponent seriously or whatever, but this is one that you can kind of get away with that just because you are that much more talented, skilled, and size-wise. I think that also matters at the end of the day. I think Notre Dame rolls into something like 41-17.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. Just to kind of tie a bow on that, I will say that, you think of all the clunkers that Notre Dame's played in over the years, and certainly we've had a few. It doesn't really seem like they do that twice in a row a whole awful lot. I think that, to Notre Dame and Brian Kelly and the coaching staff's credit, that, they get it together. They don't really, certainly there's once in a while where they sleepwalk and make the best of it by avoiding disaster and catastrophe and all of that. And then, they come out the next week and they're pretty focused. And that's pretty much what I expect. It's your first home game where you're going to have, 77,000 people in the stadium. I just think that all of those factors and things are actually, going to play to Notre Dame's favor. Almost losing, coming back and being in front of your home fans, all of that. And, I think, I wouldn't surprise me if it's tied after the first quarter, but I think Notre Dame goes on to win handily. However, I did say that about Florida State too. So we'll see.
The one thing I'll say is also with all this stuff that's happening where we expect to see Colsey and Styles and Colley and potentially Watts, do you think they're going to come out sleepwalking? I don't believe so. And I think that's going to be a big part of this is there's guys on the field that their jobs aren't as maybe secure as, let's just say none of those injuries happen. I would feel more about the potential of sleepwalking happening. But with all the change, these guys are motivated. They're getting their opportunity. They're getting a chance. And I don't see them coming out dragging ass.
Yeah. And the guys in front of them too, if all of a sudden, Lorenzo Styles is lighting the world on fire, then if you're Avery Davis or you're probably not Kevin Austin or Joe Wilkins, but you get my point. Yeah. Those guys start to up their game a little bit as well. So I think that works to their favor as well. So, all right. Well, guys, first of all, I have to commend you. Thanks for coming on the show. And, Nick, I know this is podcast number 2 for you for the week. I think it's podcast number 2 for all of us for the week. It's just the first time that all 3 of us go. So we've been grinding, I guess is probably the best way to put it. So thanks for joining me tonight. Listeners, if you listened this far, I appreciate you. I always try to say that at the end of the show. You know where to find us all over the interwebs and those types of things. So I won't drop all of that. So thanks again. And we'll be talking to you, and hopefully, the 3 of us can get on here again. This was good. This was fun. Make more of this and do this type of thing. So tell a friend about the podcast. We'll talk to you after the Toledo game. And until next time, go Irish.
Go Irish.
Go Irish, baby.